Today we are going to discuss how, with the loss of mindfulness, Satipatthana, we automatically lose the practice of the noble path of 8 constituents. And the corollary to this is, if we are fulfilled with the practice of Satipatthana, we will automatically be fulfilled with the practice of the noble path of 8 constituents. So today we shall continue to discuss about this subject of Satipatthana in accordance with the Buddha's teachings, both from the theoretical and practical aspects. Most of us who study the subject of Satipatthana, both from the theoretical and practical aspects, give emphasis on the practice of the noble path of 8 constituents. And most of us talk about this Eightfold Path. Yes, correct, Eightfold Path is crucial, is very important. However, if one is alienated from the practice of Satipatthana, or have lost, or have not practiced the fourfold mindfulness, then automatically one is said to have lost the practice of the noble path of 8 constituents. By all means, one cannot realize this practice by any means. And the Buddha has propounded this simple expression, which means monks, whoever it may be. It may be monks, laity, man, woman, devas. If one has not practiced the noble path of the fourfold mindfulness, Satipatthana, and have lost it, then one also loses the practice of the noble path of 8 constituents. In brief, no Satipatthana, no Eightfold Path. In the world, most people are negligent. They fail in their duties, social duties, including social duties. And such people who are negligent, who fail in their duties, are known as Paṇḍitā. And their failure, their negligence, lack of diligence itself is known as pamāda. Therefore, one has to discuss about this subject, pamāda, to understand the Buddha's exposition. Therefore, let us consider this subject of pamāda first: negligence or lack of diligence, failure in the duties, failing in doing what should be done. Most people fail in their omission and commission, fail to abstain from what should be abstained, and fail to observe what should be observed. That is the practice of most people. So if one commits wrongful behaviors by thought, word and deed, one is bound to defile oneself, degrade oneself, at the same time harm others. Now these physical misbehaviors, as you know, are killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. All these things are wrongful deeds by body. These are to be abstained. If one does not abstain from such wrongful deeds, then one is bound to defile or degrade oneself, at the same time harm others. So we know that these are to be abstained. Now as regards wrongful speech, they are speaking falsely, malicious speech, indulging in malicious speech, indulging in harsh speech, and meaningless talk. All these things are wrongful speech. And if one commits these, then one is bound to defile oneself, degrade oneself, at the same time harm others. These things are to be abstained. And as regards mental misbehaviors, they are covetousness, wishing to acquire other people's property by force or illegal means, and then having ill will towards others, wrongful ideas, wrongful intentions, and then entertaining wrong views, not holding this moral causation view that good begets bad, good begets bad. Instead, they will view that good will not lead to good results, and bad will not lead to bad results. These things again are mental misbehaviors which are to be abstained. If one does not abstain these wrongful thought, word and deed, then one's physical, verbal behaviors are bound to become blameworthy, impure, gross, vulgar and despicable, leading to unwholesome results. Therefore these are to be abstained. And the reverse of these things is things to be observed, not failing to commission. They are to abstain from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, as regards speech, speaking correctly, in a sweet manner, and not to have malicious speech, but instead friendly speech, and talk meaningfully. And if there's anything to help others, you would help others by giving with a feeling of generosity, openness, and letting go, and there will be no, without any covetousness. Then, having goodwill towards others, you will not have ill will. If you have goodwill towards others, there will be loving kindness, and you will only see to the welfare of others, not to their suffering or harm. And also hold moral causation view. So long as there is a cause, there must be the effect, and this is the right behavior, mental right behavior. These things are to be observed, and one should not fail in observing these moral deeds. If one does not observe them, one is said to fail or to be failing in one's duty. One is said to be neglecting, not diligent. Therefore, one fails in commissioning and commissioning things to be abstained and things to be observed. This is known as paṇḍitā, negligence, failure. And most of people in the world occupy the time with such negligence and failure. Though paṇḍitā, subject of paṇḍitā, has not been given quantitatively in the text, in accordance with the teachings, they are divided into three parts, namely gross form of paṇḍitā, which is the worst form, and the medium form of paṇḍitā, and the refined form of paṇḍitā. As for the first one, the wrongful word and deed, one fails to abstain from these wrongful physical and verbal behaviors. This is one kind of paṇḍitā. Now as for the second one can abstain from these immoral deeds by body and speech, but one spends time or one becomes occupied by pursuing the pleasures of senses. Will wish to enjoy the pleasures of senses, such as seeing pleasurable sights, hearing pleasurable sounds, tasting, and even touching, having a pleasurable touch, enjoying this pleasurable touch with animate and inanimate objects, or even or with opposite sex, thinking that such pleasures of senses are the highest or the best that one can enjoy in the world. One spends day and night being occupied with such pleasures of senses. It is you may say it is a good kind of paṇḍitā, good negligence, but compared to the better or best pleasures, you are said to have become alienated from the better or best pleasures that you can get. These pleasures of senses are pleasurable, they are good, but they are fatal and perilous. Therefore, it is something to be abstained. They are not secure. One has to look for secure pleasures. If one spends time, is occupied with these insecure pleasures of senses, then one will become alienated. One will lose these better or best secure pleasures. And such kind of negligence or failure is known as a medium type of paṇḍitā. Now as for the third kind, refined type of paṇḍitā, this concerns yogis most. Failing in the practice, in undertaking this lofty practice, failing to develop wholesome deeds, begin in the beginning to initiate the practice with faith and confidence, and then develop it, and then enhance this practice. Whether one knows the benefit of the practice or not, if one does not cherish the practice, and one does not practice respectfully and meticulously, sometimes noting, sometimes not noting, resting and so on, without any perseverance, not wishing to exert energy, and even one exerts energy, one soon gets exhausted, and such kind of activities, behavior, is known as the refined form of paṇḍitā, classified as the third kind of paṇḍitā. So in this way there are three classes of these paṇḍitā, and the first one concerns, so long as you can conduct yourself in a good way with the precepts, sila, conduct yourself in a good way, then you can overcome this paṇḍitā, the first kind of paṇḍitā. But even if one sustains these precepts and good conduct, but if one spends time, one gets occupied in these sense pleasures, then also one will be negligent. It would be in the second kind of, the medium kind of negligence, paṇḍitā. And if, as for the third one, very subtle or refined form of paṇḍitā, which concerns the practitioners, if one is negligent in this way, in a subtle way, in a refined way, then one will take time in the realization of the practice, or one may not even realize at all. So it's because of the lack of respect and meticulous practice in meditation, one will be alienated from the attainment of unique concentration and knowledge. So that has been said, given in the text, and one has to, these pamada are not to be observed, not to be, one has to abstain from these pamada. Apamada is the reverse of pamada. It is quite easy. Mostly, we are not mindful, therefore we easily commit immoral deeds, dacharitas. That is because we are not mindful. And we leave our mind uncontrolled, unrestrained in respect of the sensual pleasures. That also is the result of loss of mindfulness. And yogis in the practice of mindfulness of 4 postures, not practicing like a sick person, moving slowly, that also is the result of lack of mindfulness. So in the case of apamada, it is not so. One is attentive, mindful, not to commit immoral deeds, dacharitas, and not to leave the mind uncontrolled, unrestrained in respect of these pleasures of senses. One is ever mindful. Especially in the practice of the high-level discipline of the way of mindfulness, knowing the benefit of the practice, cherishing it, appreciating it, one practices respectfully, carefully, continuously, sustaining one's mindfulness, never alienated from sustained mindfulness. Now this is apamada. And then one sustains mindfulness, one connects one's steady mind with the object closely, always following these objects closely. This is also apamada. Diligence, non-negligence. Out of these three grades of apamada we have just discussed. As for the first one, which is the gross form, transgressive type of immoral deeds, they are a result of the loss of mindfulness, or not being mindful, leaving the mind uncontrolled. And hence, there's no mindfulness. One fails in one's duty as a human being, which one should not fail. If one fails in one's human duty, then automatically one will fail in commission and observing what should be observed. If one fails to abstain what should be abstained, then automatically one will fail to observe what should be observed. In this way, we are said to disrupt this basic conduct, human conduct, such as when we're speaking, when we have to say something, we may be saying falsely, maliciously, in a harsh way, and in a meaningless way. So these are the verbal misdeeds which are blameworthy, impure, vulgar, and gross. So in this way, by doing this, we are not ridding ourselves of these gross forms of defilements. Instead, we are letting them come to us. We are purposely committing them. Moreover, these physical behaviors, such as killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, all these things are deeds to be abstained, but instead we transgress them because of the lack of restraint, lack of mindfulness, leaving the mind uncontrolled. This is pamada. Defiling oneself, at the same time harming others. Such deeds are impure, gross, vulgar, and blameworthy. As regards the mental aspects, this immoral mental behaviors such as covetousness and ill will and having wrong view. These things are to be controlled, to be abstained, but instead one leaves the mind uncontrolled, unrestrained, so that one commits them. So we are transgressing this basic conduct. So these things are to be abstained, but we are not abstaining because we are forgotten, we are negligent, we fail in that, we fail in our duties, hence the expression pamāda, which defiles oneself and harms others. All these things are things to be abstained because they are blameworthy, impure and gross. We are said to be encouraging instead of overcoming these gross forms of defilements. Man automatically, other two pamadas, namely medium and the fine form of pamadas, also will be automatically committed. As for some, one controls this first kind of pamada, gross form. One is mindful not to commit immoral conducts and not to disrupt or not to commit immoral human conduct, so as not to defile oneself, at the same time not to harm others, not to cause fear in others. So one abstains with mindfulness, so that one's physical verbal behaviors become pure, blameless, graceful and affable. However, although one's basic conduct is pure, one leaves the mind uncontrolled, leaves free will to this in respect of the sensual pleasures of senses, so that one's mental behaviors will remain impure because of lack of mindfulness in this respect. Mind becomes impure, so that one will desire agreeable objects, one will have desire about agreeable objects, and one will have aversion about disagreeable objects, and so on. And if one's mind is left uncontrolled, leave the mind without any restraint, and not being mindful of the mind and body, then one will become confused, because one's mind is deluded, confused and bewildered, and other impurities are bound to arise at the same time. Because of the mind being uncontrolled and unrestrained, because in respect of these sensual pleasures, these things happen like this. So, of course, as a human being, as a sensuous being, we have the right to our sensual pleasure, to things we own, in a righteous way. But we should not transgress, we should not commit immoral deeds about the sensual pleasures which do not belong to us. Otherwise it will be blameworthy, impure. So we should practice restraint in order to limit our enjoyment to the sensual pleasures of senses which belong to us. Of course, when you have come to the arena of this practice of meditation, you are even restraining yourself in respect of the sensual pleasures that belong to you, by noting every arising object. As is said, guard the mind all the time with vigilant mindfulness, connecting the noting mind to the object so as not to miss it, so that the mindfulness is sustained on the object to be noted, leading to calmness of the mind And with the exertion of virya, we are connecting our naughty mind to the object. If there's no virya, no exertion of energy, then we are allowing these impurities to enter our stream of consciousness. Impurities have the chance of invading us. Now, with exertion of energy, they have no chance of coming to our stream of consciousness. And then, with the resulting mindfulness, when the mind is properly connected, we are protected. The mind is protected from impurities. And with the calmness of the mind, the Kanika Samadhi, momentary concentration, there will be no distraction of the mind, no scattering of the mind. The mind will fall calm and collected on the object of observation. So these three mental states, virya, energy, not accepting the impurities. Sati, mindfulness, protects our mind from impurities. And concentration, samadhi, will keep our mind collected, not to be distracted. So if we are able to develop these three wholesome mental states, then there's no reason for our mind to go to the thoughts of sensual pleasures. The mind will not be, will not go there. There will be no thoughts or ideas about enjoying sensual pleasures, even our own sensual pleasures. Even if our mind goes there, by any chance, in the course of the practice, because of the practice of mindfulness, there will be no greed, no craving, no desire about desirable objects. We can control ourselves. There will be no aversion about disagreeable, undesirable objects, because we can control ourselves with mindfulness. In this way, we can purify our mind. We can rid our mind of these impurities. So if we leave our mind uncontrolled, lack of mindfulness, then we will be overcome by pamāda, negligence, failure. And instead, if we are mindful and attentive, we will be diligent and not negligent, not fail, apamāda. In order to purify one's physical, verbal behaviors to be worthy of a human being, one must control, practice the restraint of this gross form of pamāda, as it is necessary to purify one's physical and verbal behaviors. And however, if one cannot control and practice the restraint of the mind, instead one feels sluggish and not wishing to exert energy so that the mind cannot become calm, these things are to be abstained. So, if you are diligent instead of being negligent in this aspect, that is the mental aspect, then your mental behavior will become blameless, pure, graceful and affable. So, in this way, you allow this apamāda to happen in your stream of consciousness all the time. So, as much as one abstains from what should be abstained, one does not forget to abstain what should be abstained. One should also not to forget, or not to fail to observe what should be observed. So, so long as we are living as a human being, we should have a target. Target is very important. Otherwise, we will not reach our destination, just like a boat without a rudder or a motor vehicle without a steering, then it will not get to our desired destination. So we should have the target, targeting precisely the object to be noted with proper connecting the object with energy, thus sustaining the mindfulness and calming the mind, so that we can observe this true nature of realities from the basics. So these things are necessary. This is because we have the proper target. So if we can go according to the correct target, so in the practice, in terms of the practice, noting mind should connect with the object precisely in order to see the realities of mind and body. Then, at that very moment, we are overcoming these impurities, the latent or dormant types of impurities. So this is observing what should be observed. If we do not observe what should be observed and abstaining what should be abstained, then we will be committing negligence. We will be negligent, we will be failing in our duties, pamāda. If not, we will be diligent, apamāda. And in terms of the practice, noting the object so as to be concurrent, to see the realities of nature, of the true nature of realities from the basics, in order to rid ourselves of these latent or dormant forms of kilesas. This is the result of not being negligent but diligent every second of the practice, not being alienated from mindfulness. Instead, one is always mindful. Briefly, in the beginning of the practice, one hasn't had good practice of aiming or targeting, so that one may find it difficult to target precisely the object to be noted, especially the main object to be noted. However, as one develops the practice, one's noting mind will become concurrent with the object to be noted. If one does not aim properly, does not aim one's mind at the target, then it will not be concurrent. But as one goes on aiming precisely, then as much as one is concurrent with the object, one is bound to observe the nature of the objects noted, track down the sensations and so on. This is very important. Like the case of target shooting, in the beginning, because of the lack of practice, one may not be able to hit a target, especially the bull's eye, for instance. One may be overshooting or missing the object and things like that. However, when the practice goes on, one has become skilled in the practice, one will become a marksman or markswoman, so that one will hit the bull's eye as soon as one starts the practice. So although in the beginning it is not easy to target the main object, later one is bound to be able to become concurrent with the object and then track down the sensations and the nature of these sensations. Let us go back to Buddha's Desana exposition about the subject of this thing. As we lose or not practice the four foundations of mindfulness, Satipatthana, we lose or not practice the noble path of eight constituents. So, as for the Satipatthana, we already know, noting every arising of the object is cultivating this Kaya-Nupassana Satipatthana, mindfulness of the body. Noting every sensation arising in the body is the mindfulness of sensations, Vedana-Nupassana Satipatthana. And noting every thought, idea and so on arising in the mind is the contemplation of Citta-Nupassana Satipatthana, mindfulness of the mind. And noting other objects, general activities such as seeing, hearing, tasting, and so on, is the practice or contemplation of Dhamma objects, Dhamma Anupasana Satipatthana. All these four things, aspects, make up the four foundations of mindfulness. Now to start the basic practice in this mindfulness meditation, let us say the practice of this mindfulness of the body, Anupasana Satipatthana. When we sit down and practice this mindfulness, basically watching the abdomen, and as we breathe in and out, every time the air goes in and out, there's bound to be this rising and falling movement of the abdomen, like the ball being inflated or deflated and down. So as the air goes in, the rising takes place, and when it goes down, when it goes out, falling takes place. So this is the common usage, rising and falling. And as for the abdomen, it is just a form concept. And it is not the sabhava, as we discussed at one time, not the natural or unique characteristic, in this case sensations. And the real sabhavas in the rising are the stiffness, tension, movement, sensations. This is simple, in simple language, simple usage. In literary sense, we call this vayo potapa, the tangibility of the wind element, that is distension. It is the manifestation of the wind element, which is manifested in the form of these sensations, stiffness, tension, and movement. They are known as sabhava. That is what we are looking for. The individual, unique characteristics, specific characteristics. So, as much as one is able to note this, watch this abdomen, for every breathing being, in all the four postures, especially in the sitting, this breathing is most obvious. That's why we are asked to, we are prescribed to watch this abdomen. As we breathe in, there's a rising vaya putapa, the tangibility of wind element, manifested in the sensations of stiffness, tension, and movement. We follow this from the beginning to the end of each sensation, with mobilizing these forces of energy and aiming. When we try to precisely target it, we are bound to go beyond this form and manner. Form means form of the abdomen, and manner means manner of the rising and falling. These two things are paññati, conceptual objects. In order to see the reality or the ultimate object, namely the sabhava, in terms of the sensations of stiffness. When your mind is connected with stiffness, you will know, you'll become aware of the stiffness sensation. When your mind becomes connected with tension, you become aware of this tension sensation. When your mind is connected with movement, you become aware of this sensation of movement. In this way, as much as you target, as much as your noti mind is concurrent with the object of observation, you are bound to see these things in microscopic details. So, other things also will be seen besides stiffness, tension, and movement. So, practicing them, these are things to be developed, things to be practiced, things to be followed. If on the other hand, if we are slack, not wishing to exert energy or getting exhausted, and if we are not able to sustain our mindfulness and calm our mind and not see the nature of these realities, then these things are to be abstained, not to be developed. Of course, it is easy to abstain these abstainable things. So long as you practice exert energy, you target precisely, and exert our energy and not to be slack, and to see the nature of the realities, then abstaining from what should be abstained. So, if you cannot abstain from what should be abstained, this will be pamāda. On the other hand, if you abstain from what should be abstained, it will be apamāda. So, not forgetting, not being negligent, not failing in your duty as a yogi, it's Kaya-nupassana Satipatthana practice. You are said to be cultivating this mindfulness of the body, Kaya-nupassana Satipatthana. If you forget to do it, or fail to do it, or neglect to practice this, then you are said to be alienated from this practice of the mindfulness of the body, Kaya-nupassana Satipatthana. You are said to have lost this Kaya-nupassana Satipatthana. If you have lost this Kaya-nupassana Satipatthana, you will be losing also this noble path, the practice of the noble path of 8 constituents. So, no Kaya-nupassana Satipatthana, no Eightfold Path. It will be more clear to say like this. If one is failing to be mindful, to practice this sila maganga, the path of morality, the coarse form or gross form of pamāda or apamāda, then if we cannot abstain from this gross form of immoral deeds, then we will not be practicing this sila maganga, the path of right morality, namely sama kamanta, sama vacha, sama kamanta, sama ajiva, the path of right speech, right action and right livelihood. We will be using these 3 things, morality group, which make up the morality group. And then if we fail to practice the noting of arising object, not being able to concentrate our mind, then we also will be losing and we will be failing our responsibilities, our duty to cultivate the samadhi maganga, the path concentration group, the path of concentration group or concentration path, namely samavayama, the right energy, samasati, right mindfulness, and samadhi, right concentration, which constitute the concentration group. So we will be failing, neglecting in the practice of this concentration group. And because of this lack of targeting, correct targeting, there will be no knowledge, no right understanding. Therefore, you will be committing also the refined form of pamāda, negligence, namely not allowing to arise this right understanding, right view, and right aim, which constitute the panya group or the wisdom path, wisdom group. So in this way, failing and neglecting, failing to do what should be done, you will be losing these 3 groups which make up the noble path of 8 constituents, namely the morality group, and then the concentration group, and wisdom group. Now one suffers loss in the 3 ways because one is not able to cultivate the 3 trainings, Sila Samadhi Panya, first of all, the Sila Sekha, the morality training. Because we are not able to sustain our morality with conscious commitment, then our physical and verbal behaviors will become impure, blameworthy, gross, vulgar, and not and despicable. So this is since you are subject to this, then you are said to be suffering loss. This is the loss, because you are not able to sustain this physical, verbal purity. And then also because you are not able to aim properly, to target properly, with the calmness of the mind will become impure. You cannot purify your mind so that it remains impure. That also is another loss. And furthermore, because of the lack of sustained mindfulness, not knowing the nature of the objects noted, you are not able to cultivate the right understanding or right view. In this way also, you are said to have lost the refined form of kilesas, and this is another loss. So this is how one loses in the three ways, the three trainings, Sila Samadhi Panya, because you are not able to cultivate these three trainings. Because starting from the lack of mindfulness, you are losing also in the practice of the noble path of 8 constituents. So, with the practice of mindfulness, one is said to be able to develop the noble path of 8 constituents, and thus be able to overcome these kilesas, which are the causes of suffering, in stages: gross form, medium form, and refined form. The corollary to this is, if one is not able to develop or practice the noble path of 8 constituents, then one will not be able to overcome in stages these kilesas, which are the causes of suffering. That means we will continue to suffer. As has been said, the 100% of human suffering have their root cause in kilesas. So, if we cannot overcome this causative kilesas, then we are bound to continue the kilesas are bound to continue to torture us, as has been done all the time. So as much as one is not mindful or loses mindfulness or being negligent or fail in the practice of mindfulness, then will also fail and be negligent and lose this noble path of 8 constituents. That means we will not be able to overcome these kilesas. That means all beings who are subject to them will continue to suffer. That much is for today. We will continue tomorrow. We will continue tomorrow. We will continue tomorrow. We will continue tomorrow.